The champagne glass shattered against the marble floor the moment my sister Victoria announced to everyone at my engagement party that my ring was fake. But the real breaking point had come 20 years earlier, when she stole everything that should have been mine. I stood frozen in the private dining room of Le Bernardin, watching the golden bubbles die on imported Italian marble, while 43 members of our extended family fell silent. The late afternoon sun slanted through floor-to-ceiling windows, casting long shadows that seemed to reach for me like accusing fingers. Victoria's Chanel No. 5 overwhelmed the delicate scent of the centerpiece roses, the same suffocating cloud that had followed her since our parents' funeral. "Oh my God, Emma, I'm so sorry," Victoria gasped, her perfectly manicured hand flying to her chest in practiced shock. "I didn't mean to say it so loudly, it's just—" She held my hand up to the light, the modest solitaire catching the sun. When you know diamonds like I do, cubic zirconia is just so obvious. The cold weight of the ring seemed to grow heavier on my finger. Marcus, my fiancé, turned the particular shade of red that meant he was calculating whether his teacher's salary could have bought something that would have passed Victoria's inspection. He couldn't have. We both knew it. But what Victoria didn't know was that this small, genuine quarter-carat diamond had cost him 3 months of savings, and it meant more to me than the 4-carat monstrosity on her own finger. "Victoria, please," Aunt Helen murmured, but her eyes glinted with the kind of satisfaction that comes from witnessing family drama that isn't your own. "What? I'm trying to help." Victoria's voice carried that special tone she'd perfected, concern wrapped in condescension, poison dressed as medicine. "Marcus, sweetheart, there are some lovely enhancement options these days. I know a jeweler who could help you upgrade when you're more financially stable." The room rippled with uncomfortable laughter and knowing looks. Poor Emma, they were thinking, still trying to keep up with her successful sister, still dating beneath her station, or rather what they thought was beneath the station I'd never actually had. Marcus's hand found mine under the table, squeezing hard enough that the ring pressed into my palm. That small pain anchored me, kept me from saying what I wanted to say. That Victoria's empire was built on our parents' ashes, that every diamond she wore was paid for with blood money, that the only fake thing in this room was her entire life story. "It's real," I said quietly, meeting her eyes. "Small, but real. Of course it is, darling." She patted my shoulder, and I caught a glimpse of the Cartier watch on her wrist, the same model our mother had wanted but could never afford. And that's what matters, isn't it? That it's real to you. The condescension dripped like honey, thick and suffocating. Our cousin Bradley actually snorted into his whiskey. The server, a young woman who'd been frozen mid-pour when the glass shattered, finally resumed filling champagne flutes, carefully stepping around the glittering shards on the floor. I looked at the broken glass, then at Victoria's smiling face, and felt something shift inside me like tectonic plates before an earthquake. For 20 years, I'd kept silent about what she'd done. For 20 years, I'd let her paint me as the charity case, the adopted sister she'd graciously taken under her wing after our parents' tragic death. For 20 years, I'd gathered evidence, waited, planned, but standing there, watching my fiancé shrink under the weight of their judgment, while Victoria preened in designer clothing bought with our parents' money, I made a decision. You're right about one thing, I said, loud enough for everyone to hear. You do know all about what's fake? Victoria's smile flickered for just a moment, so quick that only I caught it. But I saw the flash of something in her eyes, fear, recognition, or just annoyance that I was speaking up. The room held its breath, waiting to see if mousy little Emma would actually fight back. I smiled, the kind of smile I'd learned from watching Victoria all these years, sharp enough to cut, sweet enough to seem innocent. But thank you for the engagement party, Victoria. It's been illuminating. As I watched my sister's perfectly manicured fingers gesture dismissively at my ring, explaining to Uncle Robert about clarity and cut and color, I made a decision that would destroy her world. Using the very documents she thought had burned in the fire that killed our parents. The truth about that night 20 years ago lived in my bones like a cancer, growing heavier with each passing year. I was 18 when our parents died, young enough to be destroyed by grief, old enough to know that fires didn't start themselves. Victoria had been 25 then, already working in our father's tech startup, already showing the kind of ambition that made him proud and worried in equal measure. She'd called me at my dorm room at NYU that night, her voice strange and hollow. "There's been an accident," she'd said. "You need to come home." Home was a colonial in Westchester County, the kind with black shutters and a red door that my mother had painted herself one summer. By the time I arrived, it was a skeleton of charred beams and smoke-stained brick. The fire chief told me they'd died from smoke inhalation. A small mercy, he'd called it, as if any part of losing everything could be merciful. Victoria had been standing in the driveway when I pulled up, still in her work clothes, a streak of ash across her cheek like war paint. They were trying to save the documents, she told me, pulling me into a hug that smelled of smoke and something else, gasoline, though I wouldn't make that connection for years. Dad's company papers, the will, everything was in his study. The will. Of course, there had been a will. Our parents had been meticulous planners, the kind who had life insurance and emergency funds and detailed instructions for everything. The original will, the one I'd seen them sign at the lawyer's office just 6 months before, had split everything equally between us. The family's tech startup, the house, the investments, all divided down the middle. But Victoria produced a different will 2 weeks after the funeral. This one, supposedly signed just a month before their death, left everything to her with a small trust fund for me, just enough to finish college. The lawyer who'd notarized it was a friend of hers from business school. The witnesses were 2 employees from her department who no longer worked at the company. "They were worried about you," Victoria had explained, sitting across from me in a lawyer's office that smelled of leather and lies. "You were so young, so inexperienced. They wanted to make sure someone responsible was in charge until you were ready." I was grieving, traumatized, and alone. What 18-year-old has the resources or emotional bandwidth to challenge their only remaining family? I signed where they told me to sign, accepted the trust fund that would barely cover my student loans, and watched Victoria transform our parents' modest tech startup into a cosmetics empire worth $50 million. She kept the story simple for public consumption. Tragic fire, orphaned sisters, the older one taking responsibility for the family legacy. In her version, I was the adopted child our parents had taken in out of charity. A difficult teenager who'd been experimenting with drugs. The fire had been a wake-up call, she told people, and she'd graciously supported me through recovery and college despite my lack of biological claim to the family fortune. None of it was true. I wasn't adopted. I had our mother's eyes and our father's stubborn chin. I'd never touched drugs harder than the occasional joint at a college party. But Victoria told the story so often and with such conviction that even our extended family began to believe it. Why else would I have accepted such a small inheritance? Why else would I have disappeared for years afterward? The truth was simpler. I'd been building a case. My career as a forensic accountant wasn't an accident. Every course I took, every certification I earned, every late night spent learning to trace financial records through shell companies and offshore accounts, all of it was preparation. I knew Victoria had stolen from our parents' company before they died. I knew she'd been inflating invoices, redirecting funds, building her own shadow corporation with their resources. What I needed was proof, and I'd found it, piece by piece, year by year. Bank records showing transfers that matched amounts missing from the company accounts. Emails discussing Project Phoenix, her plan to rebrand the tech company as a cosmetics firm. And most damning, a paper trail showing she'd hired someone to create fake documentation just 2 weeks before the fire. But evidence wasn't enough. I needed the original will, and that had burned with everything else in our father's study. Or so Victoria thought. What she didn't know was that our parents had been paranoid enough to keep copies in multiple locations. And Harrison Webb, their first lawyer, had been paranoid enough to keep his own records even after they'd switched firms. I still wore our mother's wedding band on my right hand, a simple gold band with tiny diamonds, the only thing that had survived because I'd borrowed it for a formal event the night before the fire. Sometimes I wondered if she'd known somehow that I would need something of hers to hold on to. Marcus knew none of this history when we met 2 years ago at a charity fundraiser for public schools. He'd been there as a speaker, talking passionately about education inequality. I'd been there to watch Victoria accept an award for her generous donation, money that should have been split between us, funding her public image as a philanthropist. He'd found me crying in the coat room afterward, overwhelmed by the hypocrisy of it all. Instead of asking what was wrong, he'd simply handed me his handkerchief, an actual handkerchief, like someone from another era, and said, "Whatever it is, it doesn't deserve your tears." We'd talked until the venue staff kicked us out, then continued talking over coffee until dawn. He saw me as I was, Emma the forensic accountant, Emma who lived in a 1-bedroom apartment in Queens, Emma who took the subway and brought lunch from home. He fell in love with that Emma, not the heiress I should have been. Victoria had no idea that her personal assistant, Jennifer, was actually my college roommate, or that Jennifer had been photocopying everything for the past 3 years. The morning after the engagement party, I met Jennifer at our usual spot, a hole-in-the-wall coffee shop in Midtown, where the espresso was strong enough to wake the dead and the owner never remembered faces. She was already in our corner booth, 2 laptops open, looking every inch the Hollywood version of a spy, in her oversized sunglasses and trench coat. "You look like someone from a bad detective movie," I told her, sliding into the opposite seat. "Feel like someone from one too." She pushed a flash drive across the table. "Your sister is planning to take the company public." The coffee I just sipped turned to acid in my throat. When? 6 months? She's already started the SEC filings. Emma, if this goes through, all the stolen assets become legitimate. I know. I turned the flash drive over in my fingers, such a small thing to hold so much evidence. The IPO would wash everything clean. New investors, public scrutiny, regulatory approval. It would make it almost impossible to prove the original theft. Jennifer pulled off her sunglasses, revealing eyes red from lack of sleep. There's more. She's been destroying documents, physical ones from the old storage unit, digital ones from the early servers. She's literally erasing history. Of course she was. Victoria had always been thorough. It was what made her dangerous and what would ultimately be her downfall. She always assumed she was the smartest person in the room. I need to see Harrison Webb, I said. The lawyer, Emma, he's got to be 90 years old. 83, and he has something Victoria doesn't know exists. 3 hours later, I stood in the reception area of Sunset Manor, an assisted living facility in Connecticut that smelled of industrial disinfectant and cafeteria food. Harrison Webb sat in a wingback chair by the window, looking exactly as I remembered him from childhood. Thin, precise, with eyes that missed nothing despite their cloudy cataracts. "Emma Chen," he said before I even spoke. "You look just like your mother." "You remember me?" "I remember everything about your family, especially the things Victoria wishes I'd forget." He gestured to the chair across from him. "I've been waiting 20 years for you to come." My hands shook as I sat down. "You know what she did?" "I suspect. Knowing and proving are different beasts entirely." He reached for a cane beside his chair, the handle worn smooth from use. "Your parents came to me 2 weeks before they died. They wanted to change the will, remove Victoria entirely. She'd been stealing from the company, they said. They had proof." The room seemed to tilt. "They knew?" "Your father had hired a forensic accountant, ironic considering your career choice. The reports showed systematic embezzlement over 2 years. They were going to confront her that weekend, give her a chance to come clean before they went to the police. That weekend, the weekend they died. Mr. Webb, do you still have the original will, the real one?" He smiled, and for a moment I saw the sharp legal mind that had built my parents' company from nothing. "My dear, I may be old, but I'm not stupid. When clients die mysteriously right before major legal changes, a good lawyer keeps records." He pulled out a key from his pocket, attached to a chain around his neck. "Safety Deposit Box 447 at Connecticut Federal. Everything you need is there: the will, your parents' letter explaining the changes, and the forensic accounting report they commissioned." I stared at the key like it was the Holy Grail. "Why didn't you come forward? With what? Suspicions? A will that Victoria's lawyers would claim was superseded by a newer one? I had no proof of murder, only of motive. And you were 18, grieving, in no position to fight." He pressed the key into my palm, his fingers paper dry but steady. "But you're ready now, aren't you?" "Yes." "Good, because there's something else you should know. The investigator your parents hired, he didn't just find embezzlement. He found evidence that Victoria was planning something she called Project Phoenix. She was going to burn the company down, literally or figuratively, and rebuild it as her own. My mother's ring seemed to burn against my finger. All these years I'd worn it as a reminder. Now it felt like a responsibility. Your mother came to see me alone the day before she died," Webb continued. "She was frightened. said Victoria had been acting strangely, talking about cleansing fires and rising from ashes. She gave me this. He pulled out a small envelope, yellowed with age. Said if anything happened, I should give it to you when you were ready. Inside was a photo of our family at my high school graduation, all four of us smiling in the spring sunshine. On the back, in my mother's handwriting, truth always surfaces, love always protects, justice always comes. I heard footsteps in the hallway and tensed. Webb noticed and chuckled. Relax, though you should know. Victoria has someone watching you. What? Black sedan in the parking lot, same one that follows you every Thursday, when you supposedly visit Marcus's grandmother here. He winked. Oh yes, I know all about your cover story. Marcus's grandmother is in the West Wing. Lovely woman, teaches me poker. Despite everything, I laughed. You've been watching me watch Victoria? I've been waiting for you to be ready. And you are, aren't you? The engagement party was the last straw. I thought about Marcus's humiliation, about 43 family members who believed Victoria's lies, about my parents' ashes scattered in a garden they'd never see bloom. She called my ring fake, I said quietly. Webb leaned forward, his cloudy eyes suddenly sharp. Your parents knew Victoria was dangerous, he whispered. They were going to change the will to protect you. That's why they died. The safety deposit box felt heavier than its contents should have warranted. 3 documents and a letter that could destroy an empire. I sat in my car in the bank's parking lot, reading my father's handwriting through tears that wouldn't stop falling. My dearest Emma, it began, if you're reading this, something has happened to us, and you need to know the truth about your sister. The letter detailed 2 years of theft, manipulation, and increasingly erratic behavior. Victoria had been siphoning money to offshore accounts, using company resources to build her own cosmetics line, and threatening employees who questioned her. But the last paragraph stopped my heart. She's been talking about fire lately, about purification and rebirth, about how sometimes you have to destroy something completely to build something better. We're scared, Emma, not for us, but for you. If something happens, don't trust her. Don't trust anyone who stands to gain from our deaths. And know that we love you more than words can say. The forensic report was damning. 43 instances of embezzlement, totaling nearly $2 million. The original will left everything to me, with a small trust for Victoria that would be voided if she was convicted of any crime against the family or company. They hadn't just wanted to disinherit her, they'd wanted to protect me from her. I drove home in a daze, barely noticing the black sedan 3 cars behind me, until it followed me into my parking garage. Instead of panicking, I parked normally, gathered my groceries from the trunk, props I'd bought for this exact purpose, and walked calmly to the elevator. Let them report back to Victoria that I'd spent the morning shopping for dinner ingredients. Marcus was grading papers at the kitchen table when I walked in, red pen in hand, completely absorbed in his students' essays about social justice. He looked up when I set the groceries down, and his face immediately shifted to concern. Em, what's wrong? I pulled out the documents, spread them across his student papers, watched his expression change from confusion to horror to rage as he read. She killed them, he said flatly. Emma, she killed your parents. We can't prove that, but we can prove everything else. Then we go to the police. Tonight. Now. With what? Documents that have been hidden for 20 years? A new will that contradicts the one that's been in effect for 2 decades? She has lawyers, Marcus, good ones. He stood up so fast his chair fell backward. So what, we just let her get away with it? Let her take her blood money public? No. I picked up my mother's ring, which I'd taken off to cook. We let her hang herself. The IPO is in 6 months. She'll need to do due diligence, financial disclosures, regulatory filings. Every lie she tells the SEC is a federal crime. And in the meantime? In the meantime, I'm going to be the perfect supportive sister. The next 3 weeks played out like a chess match where only I knew we were playing. Victoria invited me to lunch at the Four Seasons to apologize for the engagement party incident. I accepted graciously, wore my ring prominently, and let her buy me a $300 meal while she talked about her IPO plans. It's going to change everything, she said, cutting into her Wagyu beef with surgical precision. $50 million was just the beginning. Once we go public, I'll be worth $500 million within 2 years. That's wonderful, I said, and meant it. The higher she climbed, the farther she'd fall. I want you to be there for the announcement. Family should share these moments. Of course, what's family for? She reached across the table and touched my ring with one manicured finger. I really am sorry about what I said. It's lovely, truly. Marcus is lucky to have you. And you? I asked, noting how she twisted her own massive engagement ring, her 3rd in 10 years. Any wedding plans? God, no. Jonathan knows better than to push. Marriage is a contract, Emma. Only enter one when the terms benefit you. Everything was a transaction to her. Even family, even love. At Sunday brunch with the extended family, she held court like a queen, regaling everyone with stories of her business triumphs. I sat quietly, recording everything on my phone tucked in my purse. When Cousin Bradley asked about our parents, Victoria launched into her practiced narrative. They were wonderful people, but terrible with money, she said, and I watched our aunts and uncles nod sympathetically. The debt they left would have crushed Emma. I couldn't let that happen to my little sister. There was no debt, I said quietly. The table went silent. Victoria's fork paused halfway to her mouth. What did you say? Nothing, I don't remember them having debt. Her laugh was crystalline, sharp enough to cut. Oh, Emma, you were so young. There was so much you didn't know. Under the table, Marcus squeezed my hand hard enough to hurt. A warning. I squeezed back, message received. That night, Victoria called me. I could hear wind in the background. She was on a terrace somewhere, probably at another charity gala. What was that about today? Her voice had lost its public sweetness. What was what? Don't play dumb, the comment about debt. I was just confused. Sometimes I have different memories. Your memories are wrong. The statement was flat, final. Whatever you think you remember, you're wrong. And Emma, it would be very unfortunate if you started spreading confusion right before my IPO. Very unfortunate for everyone, including Marcus. Is that a threat? It's a reminder that actions have consequences. Your boyfriend works at PS 158 in Brooklyn, doesn't he? Terrible neighborhood. So much violence these days. My hand was shaking, but my voice stayed steady. I understand. Good. Oh, and Emma, I've scheduled you for a spa day next Saturday. My treat. Wear something nice. There will be photographers. She hung up before I could respond. I looked at Marcus, who'd heard everything on speaker. She just threatened you, I said. We should stop. This is getting dangerous." "No." He pulled me against him, and I could feel his heart racing. "She's scared. That means we're close." My phone buzzed. Jennifer had sent a text. "She's hired a private investigator to follow you full-time. Be careful." I showed Marcus the message. He smiled grimly. "Good, let's give them something to watch." Victoria's threat should have scared me, but instead I smiled. She'd just made a crucial mistake. I'd recorded the call, and she'd practically admitted to the embezzlement. The nightmare always started the same way. The smell of smoke, the sound of glass breaking, the orange glow beneath my childhood bedroom door. But tonight, maybe because of Victoria's threat, the dream changed. This time I was in the house. This time I could hear my parents calling for help. I woke up gasping, Marcus's arms around me, before I even fully surfaced from sleep. "Just a dream," he murmured against my hair. "You're safe." But I wasn't safe. I'd never been safe, not since that night 20 years ago. "Tell me," he said quietly. "Tell me about the night they died." I'd given him facts before, but never the full memory. Now, in the darkness of our bedroom, I let it all spill out. "Mom gave me her ring that night," I began, twisting the band on my finger. "She came to my dorm room, which was weird because I was coming home the next day anyway. She said she wanted me to have it, said, 'This will protect you when I can't.'" "She knew," Marcus said. "It wasn't a question." "I think so." She looked scared, but also resolved, like she'd made a decision. She hugged me for a long time, made me promise to be careful, to watch out for myself. The memory was so clear I could still smell her perfume. Lavender and vanilla, nothing like Victoria's aggressive Chanel. Victoria had been at the house that afternoon. The neighbor, Mrs. Patterson, told me at the funeral, said she heard them arguing, Victoria and Dad, shouting about money and betrayal. Victoria left around 6, speeding out of the driveway so fast she knocked over Mom's garden gnome. "The fire started at 11, Marcus said, remembering the timeline I'd obsessed over. "Right, 5 hours later, the fire investigators said it started in Dad's study, where all the important documents were kept. Accelerant was used. They found traces of gasoline. But Victoria had an alibi. She was at a business dinner with 12 witnesses. Except she left early, around 10:30. Her assistant at the time told me years later, after 6 drinks at a company Christmas party. Victoria said she had a headache, left through the back. The assistant covered for her, said she was there the whole time because Victoria was her boss and she was scared. Marcus sat up, turned on the bedside lamp. "Emma, do you realize what you're saying?" "I'm saying my sister had means, motive, and opportunity. I'm saying the woman who called my ring fake is a murderer." The words hung in the air between us, heavy as smoke. "When I identified their bodies," I continued, needing to get it all out, "Victoria was already there. She was crying, but her makeup was perfect. Who thinks about makeup when their parents are dead?" She held my hand while I threw up in the parking lot, and her nails were freshly done. French manicure. She'd gotten her nails done while our parents' bodies were still warm. I got up, went to the closet, and pulled out a box from the top shelf. Inside were photos, documents, 20 years of evidence and memories. I found the one I was looking for. A family photo from my high school graduation, the last time we were all together and happy. "Look at her face," I said, pointing to Victoria in the picture. Even then, she's not looking at the camera. She's looking at Dad's watch, Mom's necklace, calculating their worth. Why didn't you say something back then? I tried. I told the fire investigator about the gasoline smell in her car, about the arguments, but I was 18, traumatized, and she was 25 with alibis and tears and a story about trying to save them. Who would believe me? Marcus pulled me back into bed, held me tight. I believe you. The worst part is, I don't think she meant to kill them. I think she just wanted to destroy the evidence of her theft. But the fire spread faster than she expected, or they came home earlier than planned, and suddenly arson became murder. That doesn't make it better. No, it makes it worse, because she's lived with it for 20 years, and instead of crushing her, it's made her stronger. She's a sociopath who learned she could kill and get away with it. I picked up my mother's ring from the nightstand, held it up to the light. Inside the band, barely visible, was an inscription. Truth always surfaces. Mom had this engraved a week before she died, I said, like she knew truth would need to surface someday. Marcus took the ring, studied it. Your mother would be proud of what you're doing. Would she? Sometimes I wonder if this is justice or just revenge. What's the difference? I thought about it. Justice is about balance. Revenge is about pain. I don't want Victoria to hurt. I want her to stop. Stop lying. Stop stealing. Stop pretending she's something she's not. And if she won't stop, then I'll stop her. We lay in silence for a while, listening to the city, sounds outside our window. Finally, Marcus spoke. Whatever you need to do, I'm with you. Even if it gets dangerous, she threatened you. Especially then. He kissed my forehead. Your parents would want you to have justice, and you will. I didn't tell him the rest of my plan then. Didn't mention that Jennifer had found something in Victoria's files, correspondence with a contract killer 2 days before the fire, though the job was apparently called off. I didn't tell him that whatever meant destroying Victoria in front of the entire financial world in just 10 weeks. The SEC investigator's office smelled like burnt coffee and ambition. Sarah Chen, no relation despite the shared surname, sat across from me, sharp as the crease in her power suit, reviewing the documents I'd provided. Her expression hadn't changed in 20 minutes, which I took as either very good or very bad. This is substantial, she finally said, but it's also old. These transactions are from 20 years ago. The embezzlement is old. The fraud is ongoing. I pulled out Jennifer's latest intel. She's filed IPO documents claiming she built the company from nothing. That's a material misrepresentation to investors. She's also been destroying evidence. Here are the work orders. For document shredding, server wiping, even a fire at a storage facility last month that destroyed conveniently specific boxes. Sarah's eyes sharpened. She's covering her tracks. She's trying to, but she's also getting sloppy. The IPO pressure is making her paranoid. We'd need more recent evidence, something that proves current fraud, not just historical. I smiled. How about a recorded confession? I played Victoria's threatening phone call. Sarah's poker face finally cracked. She essentially admits to the embezzlement here, and the threat, that's a separate crime. There's more. My contact inside her company has been documenting everything. Financial irregularities, destroyed documents, even a conversation where Victoria discussed eliminating obstacles before the IPO. Your contact? I can't reveal their identity yet. They're still gathering evidence. Sarah leaned back, tapped her pen against her desk. If we open an investigation, she'll know. These people always have sources. Then don't open one yet. Just be ready. The IPO announcement is in 8 weeks. She'll be in a room with 500 witnesses, live streaming to investors worldwide. If you're there when she lies, we can arrest her for securities fraud in real time. Sarah smiled for the first time. You've thought this through. I've had 20 years to think. That afternoon, Victoria called an emergency family meeting at her penthouse. The space was exactly what you'd expect. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Central Park, white everything, art that cost more than most people's homes. She'd arranged us in her living room like pieces on a chessboard, and I knew immediately something was wrong. Someone has been asking questions, she announced, pacing in front of the windows like a caged predator. About the family business, about our parents, about the fire. Uncle Robert shifted uncomfortably. Victoria, it's been 20 years. Exactly, 20 years of building, of creating something from nothing, and now someone wants to destroy it. Her eyes found mine across the room. Emma, you work in forensic accounting. Have you heard anything? The room turned to stare at me. Marcus's hand found mine, steady and warm. No, I lied smoothly. But with the IPO coming up, isn't due diligence normal? This isn't normal due diligence. Someone's been to see Harrison Webb. My heart stopped, but my face stayed neutral. Who? That's what I'm trying to find out. She picked up a crystal paperweight from her coffee table, turned it over in her hands. Webb called me yesterday, said someone was asking about Mom and Dad's will, the original will. I thought that burned in the fire, Cousin Bradley said. It did. Victoria's voice was flat, final. Everything burned, but apparently Webb has been telling stories. Confused old man, probably dementia. I've had my lawyers send him a cease and desist. For what? I asked, genuinely curious how she'd legally threaten a man for telling the truth. Defamation, harassment, whatever sticks. She set the paperweight down with a crack that made everyone jump. I've worked too hard to let some senile old fool ruin everything with fairy tales. What kind of fairy tales? Marcus asked quietly. Victoria turned on him so fast her heels scraped the marble floor. The kind that suggests I somehow stole something that was always mine. The kind that implies our parents didn't trust me. Lies, Marcus. Vicious lies from a bitter old man who's angry I didn't keep him on as company counsel. But why would he wait 20 years? Marcus began. Because I'm going public? Because suddenly there's money to be made from destroying me. She was working herself into a performance now, tears gathering in her eyes. Do you know what it's been like, carrying this family's legacy alone? Building something from the ashes of tragedy while everyone watched, waiting for me to fail? Aunt Helen rushed to comfort her, and soon Victoria was surrounded by sympathetic relatives, all assuring her of their support. Over their heads, she met my eyes. The tears were still there, but behind them was something cold and calculating. Emma, she said, her voice carrying over the murmurs of support. You'll help me, won't you? Family stands together. Of course, I said. Family stands together. That night, my phone rang at 2 a.m. Unknown number. You're playing with fire. Victoria's voice, but different, slurred, drunk. Just like they did. Victoria. They thought they were so smart, hiring investigators, gathering evidence. But fire cleanses everything, Emma. Everything. Are you confessing? A laugh, bitter and sharp. Confessing? To what? Being a better business person than our father? being stronger than our mother? They were weak, Emma. They would have given you everything just because you were the baby. So you killed them? I saved them from bankruptcy, from failure, from their own mediocrity. And I saved you too. You think you'd be who you are if you'd inherited millions at 18? You'd be nothing, another trust fund brat with no purpose. Victoria, I know it's you. The questions, the investigation. You think you're clever, but you're just like them. And you know what happened to them. The line went dead. I looked at Marcus, who'd been recording on his phone. She just confessed, he whispered. She's drunk. Any lawyer would get it thrown out. Emma, she basically just threatened to kill you. I thought about my parents, about 20 years of lies, about my ring that Victoria called fake. Good. That means she's scared, and scared people make mistakes. The next morning, Jennifer sent an encrypted message. She's moved up the IPO announcement 2 weeks from today, and Emma, she's hired someone. The same kind of someone she hired 20 years ago. Watch your back. Victoria's threat should have scared me, but instead I smiled. She'd just made a crucial mistake. I'd recorded the call, and she'd practically admitted to the embezzlement and murder. 2 weeks. I had 2 weeks to destroy an empire, built on 20 years of lies. Jennifer met me at Grand Central Station during rush hour, the perfect place to disappear in a crowd. She looked exhausted, running on coffee and determination. The IPO announcement is set for the Four Seasons Ballroom, she said, handing me a folder. 500 guests, including every major financial reporter in the city. She's streaming it live to investors worldwide. Perfect. The bigger the audience, the harder the fall. Emma, there's something else. She pulled out her phone, showed me a series of emails. She's been in contact with someone called the Cleaner, same code name from 20 years ago. My blood chilled. The contract killer? I don't think he actually kills people. I think he's more of a problem solver. Arson, evidence destruction, that kind of thing. She's paying him to be at the event. Why would she need? I stopped understanding. She's planning something. If anything goes wrong, she has a backup plan. There's good news too, though. Jennifer smiled for the first time in days. I got into her personal laptop. Emma, she recorded everything, every conversation, every threat, every bribe for the last 20 years. She's paranoid about people betraying her, so she records them to have leverage. Including a conversation with the cleaner the night before your parents died. She doesn't confess to murder, but she does admit to planning the arson. And there's more. Conversations with the lawyer who forged the will, with the witnesses who lied, with everyone who helped her steal your inheritance. I stared at the file names on her phone. 20 years of evidence, all in one place. Can you get them? Already did. They're uploaded to a secure cloud with automatic release, programmed for the IPO event if we don't stop it. No, we're not stopping it. We're going to use it. I explained my plan. Jennifer's eyes widened. That's insane and brilliant and definitely illegal. The illegal part is all Victoria. We're just going to let her hang herself. Harrison Webb agreed to attend the IPO announcement, despite Victoria's cease and desist. I'm 83 years old, he said when I warned him about potential consequences. What's she going to do? Ruin my career? Besides, I have terminal cancer. 6 months, maybe less. I'd like to see justice before I go. I wanted to cry, but didn't. Webb had been waiting 20 years to make this right, and now he was running out of time. "We need you to do one thing," I said. "When Victoria claims she built the company from nothing, you stand up. That's all, just stand." "I can do that." The night before the announcement, I stood in my apartment looking at 2 dresses. One was designer, borrowed from Jennifer, the kind of thing Victoria would expect me to wear to impress the crowd. The other was simple, black, the same one I'd worn to our parents' funeral. Marcus found me there, paralyzed by the choice. "The black one," he said without hesitation. "You're not trying to impress them. You're there for your parents." He was right. This wasn't about me becoming Victoria. This was about revealing who Victoria really was. "I have something for you," he said, pulling out a small box. "I know the timing is weird, but I wanted you to have this before tomorrow." Inside was a simple silver bracelet with 3 charms, a phoenix, a diamond, and a key. "The phoenix for rising from ashes," he explained. "The diamond because real recognizes real. And the key because tomorrow you're unlocking the truth." I kissed him, long and deep. If something goes wrong tomorrow, nothing will go wrong. But if it does, if she has something planned that we didn't anticipate, then we handle it together, like we always do. That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat at the kitchen table, my mother's ring on one hand, Marcus's bracelet on my wrist, staring at the photo from my high school graduation. 4 faces, 2 dead, 1 evil, 1 seeking justice. "I'm sorry it took so long," I whispered to my parents' images. "But tomorrow, everyone will know the truth." My phone buzzed. Victoria had sent a text. "Wear something nice tomorrow, little sister. I want you to look presentable when I prove to everyone that I'm the only real success in this family." I texted back, "I'll wear Mom's ring, the real one." 3 dots appeared, showing she was typing. They appeared and disappeared several times. Finally, "See you tomorrow." I looked at the video Jennifer had prepared. 20 years of evidence edited into a 15-minute presentation that would play during Victoria's speech. It started with home videos of our parents talking about their dreams for both their daughters, their plans to split everything equally. It ended with Victoria's drunken confession from last week. Tomorrow the truth would surface. Tomorrow the phoenix would burn. The morning of the IPO announcement, Victoria sent me a text. "Wear something nice, little sister. I want you to look presentable when I prove to everyone that I'm the only real success in this family." I texted back, "I'll wear Mom's ring, the real one." The 4 Seasons ballroom looked like Victoria's fantasy made manifest. Ice sculptures shaped like phoenixes, champagne towers that caught the light like liquid diamonds, and 500 of New York's most powerful people, arranged like an audience at her coronation. I stood at the entrance in my simple black dress, Mother's ring catching the light, and thought about how fitting it was that she'd chosen phoenixes. She'd built her empire on ashes. Now she'd watch it burn. "Emma," Victoria glided over in a $30,000 Valentino gown that probably cost more than Marcus made in a year. "You wore black. How appropriate." "It felt right," I said. "Endings and beginnings." Her smile flickered for just a moment. "Well, this is certainly a beginning. Come, I've saved you a seat up front. Families should be close for moments like this." She led me through the crowd, introducing me to investors and reporters with that special condescension she'd perfected. "This is my little sister Emma. She's done so well despite everything." The implications hung in the air, despite being adopted, despite having nothing, despite being less than. I smiled and shook hands and waited. Harrison Webb was already seated in the third row, looking frailer than he had 2 weeks ago, but with eyes still sharp as surgical instruments. He caught my gaze and nodded slightly. Sarah from the SEC was there too, posing as a financial reporter, her team scattered throughout the room. Victoria took the stage at exactly noon because she'd always been theatrical about timing. The lights dimmed, a spotlight found her, and she began the performance of her life. 20 years ago, I lost everything, she began, and I had to admire the audacity of starting with the truth, even if she was about to twist it into lies. My parents died in a tragic fire, leaving behind debt, a failing company, and a younger sister who needed protection. The crowd murmured sympathetically. Marcus, seated beside me, took my hand. But from those ashes, I built something extraordinary. From nothing, literally nothing but determination and vision, I created Victoria Chen Cosmetics. Now valued at $50 million and about to go public at 3 times that amount. This was the moment. I nodded to Jennifer, who was stationed at the AV controls as part of the technical crew. Before we discuss the future, Victoria continued, I want to share our journey, a video retrospective of how we got here. The screens around the room flickered to life. Victoria's promotional video began for about 10 seconds. Then Jennifer's program kicked in and everything changed. The first image was the original will, clearly showing equal distribution between both daughters. Then the forensic accounting report showing the embezzlement. Then security footage from the office the night before the fire, showing Victoria loading boxes of documents into her car. What is this? Victoria's voice cracked through her microphone. Turn it off, technical error. But it kept playing. Her voice filled the room, the drunk confession from last week. They thought they were so smart, but fire cleanses everything, Emma, everything. The crowd had gone silent, 500 people, watching Victoria's empire crumble in real time. But the video wasn't done. The next clip was from 20 years ago. A crackling recording of Victoria talking to someone. I need the study burned, tonight. Make it look electrical. No, they'll be at the theater. Yes, all the documents. What do you mean? What if they come home early? They won't. Fine, if something goes wrong, handle it. The timestamp was 3 hours before our parents died. Turn it off, Victoria screamed. But Jennifer had locked the system. The presentation would run its full course. Harrison Webb stood up slowly, deliberately, his cane shaking but his voice steady. I was Thomas and Linda Chen's attorney. That will you showed after their death. I never notarized it. You forged my signature. The SEC agents were moving now, but Victoria had one last card to play. She pulled out her phone, and I knew she was signaling the cleaner. Within seconds, the fire alarm went off. Sprinklers activated, chaos erupted, and in the confusion, Victoria ran. But I knew where she was going. She always went to the same place when cornered, up. The rooftop terrace, where she could think, plan, escape. I found her there, standing at the edge. The city spread below us, like a glittering promise she'd never quite reached. You destroyed everything, she said without turning around. Everything I built. Everything you stole. She turned then, and for the first time in 20 years, I saw my sister without her mask. She looked exhausted, hollow, older than her 45 years. I didn't mean for them to die, she said quietly. The fire was supposed to be small, controlled, just enough to destroy the evidence. But they came home early. The theater was sold out. They came home and tried to save the documents, the photos, the stupid sentimental things that didn't matter. They mattered to them. I tried to save them. I called 911, but it was too late. The smoke. She touched her throat. I can still smell it sometimes. Then why? Why continue the lie? Because if I stopped, if I admitted the truth, then they died for nothing. At least this way, their death meant something. It built something. It built a lie, Victoria. She laughed, bitter and broken. Everything is a lie, Emma. Every success, every fortune, every empire. You think those men in that ballroom got their money cleanly? You think anyone in this city is innocent? I think our parents were, and they loved you anyway. That broke her. She crumpled, designer gown pooling around her like spilled ink. I know, she whispered. They loved me, and I killed them for money. Do you know what that's like, living with that for 20 years? The SEC agents appeared in the doorway. Sarah Chen stepped forward, handcuffs ready. Victoria Chen, you're under arrest for securities fraud, embezzlement, and conspiracy to commit arson. Victoria stood, brushed off her gown with hands that shook only slightly. As the handcuffs clicked around her wrists, she looked at me one last time. The ring, she said, nodding at my hand. It's real. I always knew it was real. I just wanted to hurt you like you hurt me by existing, by being loved without having to earn it. You were loved too, I said. You just never believed it was enough. As they led her away, she whispered something only I could hear. I left you something. In the safety deposit box I thought you'd never find. Our parents' wedding rings. I couldn't let them burn. As the handcuffs clicked around Victoria's wrists, she whispered something only I could hear. Something that changed everything I thought I knew about the night of the fire. The media called it the Phoenix Fall, the most dramatic corporate collapse in New York history, all captured on livestream for the world to witness. Within hours, Victoria's face was on every news channel, her empire dissected by financial analysts who'd praised her just days before. But I wasn't watching the news. I was sitting in a cold room at the Federal Detention Center, waiting to see my sister one last time before her transfer to federal prison. She looked smaller in orange, stripped of her armor of designer clothes and careful makeup. Without her heels, we were the same height, something I'd forgotten after years of looking up at her. You came, she said, sitting across from me at the metal table. You're my sister. Still, after everything? Always. That's what family means. She laughed, but it turned into a sob halfway through. I killed them, Emma. Our parents. I killed them for money. Tell me what really happened. And finally, after 20 years, she did. I'd been skimming from the company for 2 years. Just small amounts at first, then more when I realized how easy it was. I had plans, big plans for a cosmetics line, for freedom from Dad's constant disappointment and Mom's suffocating concern. But they found out, hired that investigator without telling me. She picked at a scratch on the table, her unmanicured nails looking strange and vulnerable. I panicked. I hired someone to burn the study, destroy the evidence. It was supposed to happen when they were at the theater, but the show was sold out. They came home early, saw the smoke, and ran inside. Dad was trying to save the company records. Mom was trying to save the photo albums. They died trying to save pieces of a life I was destroying. The will? I forged it afterward, paid off Webb's assistant to fake the notarization, created witnesses who'd say anything for money. I thought if I could just build something great enough, it would justify their deaths, make it mean something. It meant something anyway. They were our parents. I know that now, 20 years too late, but I know. She met my eyes for the first time. The safety deposit box, 1247 at Chase, Manhattan. I saved their rings, some photos, things I couldn't let burn. I've been paying for that box for 20 years, never able to look inside, but unable to let it go. Why tell me now? Because I'm tired of carrying it alone, and because you deserve to have something of theirs that isn't tainted by what I did. The guard indicated our time was almost up. Victoria stood, then paused. The recording from the announcement. How did you get my old files? Jennifer, my college roommate. She's been your assistant for 3 years. Victoria actually smiled. I trained you well, even if I didn't mean to. You didn't train me. Grief did, loss did, the need for justice did. Is that what this is? Justice? I don't know anymore. Maybe it's just truth. The guard led her away. At the door, she turned back. For what it's worth, I'm sorry about your ring. Marcus is lucky to have you. You're real in a way I never learned how to be. The trial was swift. With that much evidence, her lawyers recommended a plea deal. 25 years for embezzlement, fraud, and manslaughter. She'd be 65 when she got out, if she got out. The company was liquidated, the assets distributed to creditors and investors she'd defrauded. I was entitled to everything as the rightful heir, but I didn't want blood money. Instead, I worked with Sarah Chen to establish the Chen Family Foundation for young entrepreneurs, specifically those who'd lost parents to violence or accident. The first scholarship went to a girl from Brooklyn whose parents had died in a car accident, leaving her with nothing but debt and determination. She reminded me of myself at 18, except she'd have the support I never did. Marcus and I got married that spring in a small ceremony in Prospect Park. I wore my mother's ring as my something old, the bracelet Marcus had given me as something new. Jennifer was my maid of honor. Harrison Webb gave me away weeks before the cancer finally took him. He died knowing justice had been served, which was all he'd wanted. The extended family fractured after Victoria's arrest. Some believed she'd been framed. Others distanced themselves from the scandal. Uncle Robert sent a letter apologizing for years of believing Victoria's lies. Aunt Helen never spoke to me again. I was okay with both responses. I'd learned that family was about choice, not just blood. 6 months after the trial, I received a letter from Victoria. Her handwriting was still perfect, controlled, even from prison. Emma, I've been in therapy here. The psychiatrist says I have antisocial personality disorder with narcissistic features. Fancy words for saying I'm broken in ways that can't be fixed, only managed. I dream about them every night now. Not the fire, but before. Breakfast conversations, Dad's terrible jokes, Mom's off-key singing in the shower, things I'd forgotten I remembered. You asked if I loved them. I did. I do. I just loved myself more, and that's the real tragedy. Don't visit again. Live your life. Be happy. That's the only penance I can offer, removing myself from your happiness. But know this, you won. Not because you exposed me, but because you stayed human through it all. You kept your capacity for love. That's the real inheritance our parents left, and you're the only one who claimed it. V. I kept the letter but honored her request. I didn't visit again. A year later, Marcus and I had a daughter. We named her Linda, after my mother. When she was old enough to notice jewelry, she'd point at my wedding ring, Marcus's modest diamond, and my mother's band, welded together by a jeweler who understood that value isn't always about size. Pretty, she'd say, and I'd tell her it's real. The day Victoria was sentenced, I received a package with no return address. Inside was our father's watch, the one that supposedly burned in the fire, and a note in Victoria's handwriting. I saved this for you. I'm not a complete monster. 5 years had passed since the Phoenix Fall, as the media still called it. I stood in the same private dining room at Le Bernardin, where Victoria had humiliated me about my ring. But everything else had changed. The space was filled with different faces, scholarship recipients from the Chen Foundation, young entrepreneurs who'd built real businesses from actual nothing, not stolen fortunes. Marcus raised his champagne glass, the same brand Victoria had favored, though we'd bought it ourselves with teaching salary and consulting fees. 5 years ago in this room, he began, his voice carrying to every corner. Someone tried to diminish Emma by calling her ring fake. That person believed that worth was measured in carats, that love could be weighed in gold, that success meant standing on others' shoulders, even if you had to push them down first. The room was silent. 23 young faces turned toward us with the kind of attention that came from understanding struggle. But Emma taught me something that night, and every night since. The most valuable things in life can't be appraised. They're measured in truth, in resilience, in the choice to build rather than burn. Jennifer stood next, her own engagement ring catching the light. Another modest solitaire from another teacher's salary. Her fiancé, David, had proposed after watching her help expose Victoria, saying he wanted a partner brave enough to stand for truth. To real diamonds, Jennifer toasted, no matter their size. To real diamonds, the room echoed. After the toasts, after the speeches from kids who'd lost everything and built something anyway, I found myself alone on the terrace. The city sparkled below, each light a life, a story, a possibility. I turned my wedding ring on my finger, feeling the place where 2 different rings had been joined, the one bought with a teacher's savings, and the one that survived a fire meant to destroy everything. Mom? Linda's voice came from behind me. She was 5 now, all Marcus's kindness and my determination, wrapped in a tiny package that wore tutus to formal events. Hi, sweetheart, past your bedtime. Daddy said you might need company. I picked her up, settled her on my hip the way my mother had held me. She played with my ring, a habit she'd developed as a baby. Tell me about the rings again, she said, though she knew the story by heart. This one, I pointed to Marcus's diamond. Your daddy bought with money he saved for a whole year. He ate peanut butter sandwiches for lunch every day to afford it. And this one belonged to your grandmother Linda. Your grandparents gave it to each other when they had nothing but love and dreams. Which one is worth more? It was a new question I thought about how to answer. They're both priceless. Value isn't about money, baby. It's about meaning. Is that why Aunt Victoria was wrong? We'd told Linda about Victoria in age-appropriate ways, that she'd made bad choices, hurt people, and had to go away to understand what she'd done. Aunt Victoria forgot that things matter less than people. She thought having expensive things would make her valuable, but value comes from who we are, not what we have. Will she ever come back? Maybe someday, when she's learned how to be real. Linda seemed satisfied with that. She wiggled down and ran back inside, where Marcus was teaching the scholarship kids how to swing dance, filling the room with laughter that would have made my parents smile. I stayed on the terrace a moment longer, looking at the spot where Victoria had stood 5 years ago, ready to jump rather than face justice. She'd chosen to live, to face consequences, to finally stop running from the fire she'd started. That took its own kind of courage. My phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number, but I recognized the source. Prisoners could send emails now that were converted to texts. Saw the news about the Foundation's 5th anniversary. You're doing good work, the real kind. V. I didn't respond, but I saved the message. Maybe someday, when enough years had passed, when the wounds had healed into scars, we could find our way to something like forgiveness. Not the movie kind where everything was forgotten, but the real kind where you acknowledged the hurt and chose to move forward anyway. Emma, Marcus called from inside. They're asking for a speech. I took one last look at the city, at the lights that never dimmed, no matter how dark the night got. Then I went inside to tell 23 orphaned entrepreneurs the truth about starting over. Sometimes you had to burn down the lies to build something real. Sometimes the fake diamonds were worth more than the real ones. Sometimes your sister could destroy your life and save it at the same time. But always, always, the truth would surface. Standing at the podium, looking at those young faces full of determination and damage and hope, I thought about Victoria in her cell, about our parents in their graves, about the girl I'd been when this all started. 5 years ago, someone called my engagement ring fake, I began. She was wrong about the ring, but she was right about one thing. I was fake. I was pretending to be okay with injustice, pretending that truth didn't matter as long as everyone was comfortable, pretending that keeping peace was more important than keeping faith with the dead. The room was silent, that particular silence of recognition. But here's what I learned. Fake diamonds and real ones look the same to most people. It's only under pressure, under the right light, that you can tell the difference. Every one of you has been pressure tested by loss. You've been held up to the light and found real. I held up my hand, the 2 rings catching the light. This is my wedding ring. It's made from 2 different rings. One that represents new love, one that survived an attempt to destroy it. Together, they remind me that we're not defined by what we've lost, but by what we choose to build from the ashes. The applause was warm, genuine, nothing like the polite clapping at Victoria's events. These kids knew the weight of real appreciation. As the evening wound down, as the scholarship recipients shared their own stories of loss and resilience, I stood where Victoria had stood years ago. But instead of announcing an empire built on lies, we were celebrating something smaller but infinitely more valuable. Truth, justice, and the radical act of choosing to build rather than burn. Marcus found me as the last guests were leaving, pulled me into a dance even though there was no music. No regrets? He asked. None. You? Just one. He spun me, making me laugh. I should have bought a bigger ring. Don't you dare. This ring is perfect. It's real. Like you. Like us. We danced in the empty room where it all began and ended, where Victoria's empire fell and our foundation rose. Outside, New York hummed with its endless energy, and somewhere in a federal prison, my sister was learning the difference between worth and value, between having and being. The champagne glasses were cleared away, the lights dimmed, but the truth remained, solid as a diamond, whether real or fake. We are not what we own, but what we overcome. We are not our worst moments, but our best choices. And sometimes, just sometimes, justice comes, dressed in a simple black dress and a modest ring, bearing witness to the truth that always, always surfaces. If this story of choosing truth over comfort resonated with you, remember that real strength isn't about revenge. It's about the courage to stand for justice, even when it costs everything. The most elegant revenge is living authentically, building genuinely, and proving that real diamonds shine brightest under pressure. Sometimes the smallest ring carries the biggest truth, that love, justice, and integrity are the only currencies that matter.